Did you really think 8,133 tons of American gold could just sit in Kentucky for 70 years without anyone asking questions? While you were trusting the system, the Federal Reserve has been playing the most dangerous shell game in human history, and the receipts are about to blow your mind. Here's what they don't want you to know. The last independent audit of Fort Knox happened in 1953, 71 years ago. Eisenhower was president. Color television was experimental. And since then, not a single independent inspector has been allowed inside America's most famous vault. But here's the kicker. The Federal Reserve's own audit documents show massive discrepancies that would make Enron executives blush. Let me give you the receipts. In 1953, the U.S. Treasury reported 20,663 tons of gold reserves. Today, they claim 8,133 tons. That's a 60% reduction. The official story? Gold sales and international settlements. But dig deeper into the Federal Reserve's H4.1 statistical releases, and you'll find something terrifying. The gold certificate account shows values that haven't matched physical inventory reports since the Nixon shock of 1971. The mainstream narrative wants you to believe this is about national security. CNN runs headlines about protecting America's gold reserves from potential threats. But the real threat isn't foreign governments, it's American citizens discovering that the vault might be emptier than a campaign promise. The Treasury Inspector General's office has repeatedly requested access for comprehensive audits. Guess what happened? Classified, denied, postponed indefinitely. Here's where it gets interesting. In 2012, Congressman Ron Paul introduced H.R. 1495, the Federal Reserve Transparency Act, which included provisions for a comprehensive gold audit. The bill passed the House 327 to 98. Bipartisan support, but it died in the Senate. Why? Because certain senators understood that opening Fort Knox would be like opening Pandora's box, except instead of releasing evil into the world, it would reveal that the evil has been there all along. Let me break down the four-stage deception that's been operating since 1971. Stage 1, the gold standard illusion. From 1944 to 1971, the Bretton Woods system promised that dollars were as good as gold because they were supposedly backed by Fort Knox reserves. Foreign governments could theoretically exchange dollars for physical gold at $35 per ounce. This created the ultimate confidence game. Nobody actually wanted to exchange because the system seemed so stable. Stage 2, the leverage trap. By the 1960s, the Federal Reserve was issuing far more dollars than could be backed by physical gold. Internal Fed documents from 1969 show they were operating on a fractional gold reserve of less than 22%. But here's the genius of the trap. They kept issuing gold certificates to member banks as if the physical gold was still sitting in Kentucky. These banks then used those certificates as collateral for lending, creating a pyramid of paper promises built on an increasingly hollow foundation. Stage 3, the breaking point. In August 1971, France's President Charles de Gaulle called their bluff. He sent a naval destroyer to New York Harbor, demanding physical gold in exchange for dollars. Nixon's response? Close the gold window, suspend convertibility. The official story was that this was temporary to protect against speculators. 53 years later, that window remains welded shut. But here's what they didn't tell you. Internal Treasury memos from 1971, declassified in 2001, show they were already planning to refuse large redemption requests as early as 1969. Stage 4, the Great Cover-Up. Since 1971, every audit of Fort Knox has been conducted by Treasury employees using Treasury procedures with Treasury oversight. It's like letting a bank robber investigate his own crime scene. The 1974 audit involved 12 Treasury officials, 4 Mint officials, and 7 members of Congress. They were shown 4,176 tons of gold, roughly half of the claimed reserves. They were not allowed to verify purity, authenticity, or even take photographs. The entire inspection lasted exactly 6 hours. But here's where the receipts get really explosive. The Federal Reserve's own financial statements show something called gold stock valued at exactly $11.041 billion since 1973. Not $11.04 billion, not $11.042 billion, exactly $11.041 billion for almost 50 years, regardless of market fluctuations. This means they're valuing 8,133 tons of gold at the official price of $42.22 per ounce. A price that hasn't reflected reality since the Carter administration. At today's gold price of $2,000 per ounce, those same reserves would be worth $520 billion. Either the Federal Reserve doesn't understand basic mathematics, or they're hiding something monumental. Let me give you the historical mirror that proves this pattern never changes. In 1720, the French government under John Law created the Mississippi Company, promising vast gold reserves in Louisiana. Investors poured in their wealth, trusting official assurances about limitless precious metals waiting to be mined. The reality? The gold never existed. When investors demanded to see proof, the government refused access to the mining sites for security reasons. Sound familiar? The Mississippi bubble collapsed when a single large investor, the Prince de Conti, demanded physical delivery of his gold. The entire French financial system imploded within months. Fast forward to 1925, the Bank of England claimed massive gold reserves to back the pound sterling's return to the gold standard. Winston Churchill, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, assured Parliament that Britain's gold reserves were absolutely secure and fully verified. But internal bank documents revealed decades later showed they were operating on borrowed gold from American banks, gold that was already pledged as collateral elsewhere. When the 1931 financial crisis hit and countries began demanding physical delivery, Britain was forced off the gold standard in a matter of days. The pattern is always the same: promise physical backing, refuse independent verification, create paper substitutes, and pray nobody calls your bluff. But eventually, someone always does, and when that happens, the house of cards doesn't just fall, it vaporizes. Here's your mainstream canary in the coal mine. In 2020, Germany's Bundesbank completed a 7-year operation to repatriate 300 tons of gold from Federal Reserve vaults in New York. The original plan was to bring back 700 tons over 3 years. Instead, it took 7 years to retrieve less than half that amount. The German auditors noted significant delays and administrative complications. Translation: the Fed couldn't locate all the German gold quickly enough to maintain the illusion of proper inventory management. But it gets worse. In 2021, the Netherlands Central Bank quietly abandoned its plan to repatriate 122 tons of gold from the Federal Reserve. The official reason? Changing geopolitical priorities. The real reason, according to leaked diplomatic cables, the Fed informed Dutch officials that a comprehensive inventory review would be required first, a review that could take several years to complete. Translation: we need time to figure out where your gold went. Meanwhile, ordinary Americans are waking up to the scam. Physical gold dealers report unprecedented demand, with delivery delays stretching 4-6 weeks for standard bullion coins. The US Mint has been rationing gold eagle production since 2020, citing supply constraints. But here's the contradiction that should terrify you. How can a country that supposedly holds 8,133 tons of gold have supply constraints for gold coins? It's like a billionaire claiming he can't make change for a $20 bill. The Asian markets are reading these signals loud and clear. China's central bank has been adding gold reserves for 18 consecutive months, purchasing over 400 tons since early 2022. Russia, despite sanctions, continues accumulating physical gold while selling dollar-denominated treasuries. India's households hold approximately 25,000 tons of gold, more than triple America's claimed official reserves. These aren't random investment decisions, they're strategic positioning for a monetary system that no longer trusts American promises. Here's the mechanism that's about to trigger the Great Reckoning. Every major central bank maintains gold holdings through the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. These holdings are used as collateral for international swap agreements and emergency liquidity facilities. But here's the catch: the same gold bars are being pledged by multiple institutions simultaneously. It's called rehypothecation, and it's legal under current international banking law. 1 physical ounce of gold can serve as collateral for 10 different transactions across 5 different countries. The Federal Reserve participates in this system through something called the Central Bank Gold Agreement, which allows participating banks to lend gold to each other without physical movement. On paper, everyone's books balance. In reality, it's the largest shell game in human history. And Fort Knox? It might just be the empty shell in the middle of the table. Consider this smoking gun. In 2019, the Federal Reserve began purchasing $60 billion per month in Treasury securities to address a temporary liquidity shortage in repo markets. But simultaneously, they began sterilizing these purchases by selling gold certificates to member banks. The certificates were backed by official gold reserves, the same reserves that haven't been independently audited since Eisenhower was president. They were literally printing money backed by potentially non-existent gold to purchase debt issued by a government that was borrowing money to pay interest on previous borrowings. It's financial inception, and Fort Knox is the dream within the dream. Here's your action plan, because in a crisis, wealth isn't destroyed, it's transferred. First, calculate your exposure to dollar-denominated assets. This includes bank deposits, treasury bonds, corporate debt, and even your checking account. If the gold backing the entire system is revealed to be insufficient or non-existent, the dollar's purchasing power will collapse faster than FTX's balance sheet. Second, understand the difference between paper gold and physical gold. Exchange-traded funds like GLD and IAU hold certificates, not bars. They're convenient for trading, but useless for wealth preservation. When the system breaks, those certificates will be worth exactly what they're printed on paper. Physical gold, stored outside the banking system, can't be rehypothecated, can't be digitally confiscated, and can't vanish in a computer glitch. Third, watch the international settlement markets. When major economies stop accepting dollars for gold transactions, when the London Bullion Market Association starts reporting delivery failures, when Switzerland begins refusing to process large gold transfers, these are your early warning signals that someone has finally looked inside Fort Knox and found it wanting. The Federal Reserve's refusal to allow independent audits isn't about protecting America's gold, it's about protecting America's greatest lie. For 71 years, they've maintained the illusion that 8,133 tons of gold sits in a Kentucky vault, backing the world's reserve currency. But illusions, like all forms of debt, eventually come due. And when this one does, the only question will be, which side of the greatest wealth transfer in human history will you be on? The side that trusted the promises or the side that demanded to see the receipts?